The challenge. The vast hall of the alien space station was filled with chatter, laughter, and the occasional hum of strange machines. Scientists, inventors, and engineers from across the galaxy had gathered for the prestigious Coalition Invention Showcase. For many, it was a chance to prove their worth. For some, it was an opportunity to mock those who dared to dream beyond their limits. Jake adjusted his simple gray jacket, the fabric looking worn compared to the sleek, shiny attire of alien inventors around him. He felt like a tiny fish in an ocean of giants. His invention, a small, plain-looking device clutched tightly in his hand, seemed almost laughable against the grand contraptions displayed on glowing platforms. But Jake wasn't here to be intimidated. He had worked too hard to reach this moment. "Is that the human entry?" A soft but mocking voice rang out, breaking Jake's concentration. Jake turned to see Lythra, an elegant alien with shimmering blue skin and eyes that glowed faintly like embers. She was one of the most respected inventors in the galaxy. Her reputation for designing advanced plasma systems was unmatched. Beside her floated her latest creation, a sleek sphere that pulsed with energy, radiating a low hum that made the hairs on Jake's arm stand up. "Yes," Jake replied simply, holding up his device. It was no bigger than a shoebox, with a few blinking lights and exposed wires. Compared to Lythra's flawless design, his prototype looked like it had been cobbled together in a garage. Lythra tilted her head, examining the crude object. Then she laughed, a sharp musical sound that drew the attention of others nearby. "Is this some kind of joke?" she asked, her voice dripping with amusement. "What is it supposed to do? Cook food? Clean floors?" Jake clenched his jaw, but kept his tone calm. "It's a device that can harness energy from empty space, a self-sustaining energy source that requires no fuel." The laughter around him grew louder. A tall alien with scales like polished stone shook his head. "Humans and their wild imaginations. You don't even understand the basic principles of subspace energy." Jake ignored the comment, focusing on Lythra. "I know it sounds impossible, but I've tested it. It works." Lythra raised an eyebrow, her expression turning from amusement to mild curiosity. "If it really works, why does it look so primitive?" Jake exhaled. He had expected this reaction. "Because I put all my resources into making the technology work, not the appearance. The real power is inside." Lythra smirked. "Inside, you say? Well, why don't you show us? Prove to everyone here that humans aren't just dreaming up fairy tales." Jake's heart raced, but he nodded. "Fine. Let's test it." A small crowd began to gather as Jake walked over to a nearby demonstration table. He carefully placed his device on the surface and plugged it into a standard Coalition power port. The hum of alien conversations faded as more eyes turned to watch. "You're wasting everyone's time," Lythra said, crossing her arms. "But go ahead. Show us what your little box can do." Jake's fingers trembled slightly as he pressed a sequence of buttons on the device. It beeped once, twice, and then began to emit a faint glow. The crowd leaned in, their curiosity piqued. At first, nothing seemed to happen. The glow from the device flickered weakly, barely illuminating the table. Lythra let out an exaggerated yawn, earning chuckles from the audience. But Jake wasn't finished. He adjusted a small dial on the side of the device, and the glow steadied. A soft hum filled the air, growing louder with each passing second. Then, the impossible happened. A small, stable energy field began to form above the device. It shimmered like liquid light, dancing and swirling in the air. The room fell silent. The energy grew brighter, creating patterns that seemed to ripple through space itself. Someone in the crowd gasped. "Is that a zero-point energy field?" Lythra's smirk disappeared. She stepped closer, her glowing eyes narrowing, as she studied the phenomenon. "That can't be possible," she muttered under her breath. Jake glanced at her. "Still think it's just a fairy tale?" The field flickered again, and Jake quickly adjusted another control, stabilizing it. The energy rippled outward, and nearby devices powered off momentarily, as if the field was drawing energy from everything around it. The crowd murmured in awe. But then, the glow started to dim. Jake frowned, realizing the limitations of his prototype. He turned it off before it could destabilize completely. The room plunged into silence once more. "Well," Jake said, looking directly at Lythra. "Still think humans don't belong here?" Lythra opened her mouth, then closed it again, clearly struggling to find words. The crowd began to disperse, some muttering with disbelief, others whispering about the human's strange invention. Jake picked up his device, his hand steady now. He had made his point, but he knew this was just the beginning. There was still so much work to do, and Lythra's skeptical glare told him she wasn't convinced yet. "You've got potential, human," Lythra said finally, her voice lower, more serious. "But one little trick doesn't prove anything. If you really want to be taken seriously, you'll need more than this." Jake met her gaze, his determination burning brighter than ever. "Then watch me." The first trial. Jake stared at the empty lab, his reflection flickering in the metallic walls as faint vibrations hummed beneath his boots. He gripped the small device tighter, his knuckles white. The laughter from the showcase hall still echoed in his mind, especially Lythra's sharp, cutting mockery. Her words weren't just an insult, they were a challenge. He exhaled slowly. This was no longer about proving her wrong. It was about proving something to himself. The lab door slid open with a faint hiss, and Fricks, a young alien technician with a wiry build and luminous green eyes, shuffled inside. His thin arms were stacked with tools and data pads. He paused when he saw Jake and tilted his head. "You're still here, human." Fricks's voice was quiet but curious. "I thought you'd left after that performance." Jake smiled wryly. "No, I don't give up that easily." Fricks placed the tools on a nearby counter and crossed his arms. "You know, I've worked on 100 different projects here, but I'd never seen anything like your device. It's strange. Crude, sure, but there's something in it." Jake raised an eyebrow. "You're not mocking me?" Fricks shook his head. "Not everyone here thinks humans are hopeless. Some of us know that simplicity can hide brilliance." He paused. "But you have to show them. Words won't work." Jake nodded, setting the device on the lab table. He tapped a button, and the tiny machine hummed to life. Its faint glow seemed to struggle at first, like a fire trying to catch. He adjusted a few dials and muttered to himself, mentally running through every calculation he had ever done on this project. "You've seen this before, right?" Jake asked without looking up. "Not exactly," Fricks replied. "I've seen subspace generators and zero-point prototypes, but they're all massive. This is different. But I have to ask, why is it struggling?" Jake hesitated. "The theory's solid. The problem is power. It's like trying to light a stadium with a single matchstick. I need more input to scale it." Fricks leaned over the device, his glowing eyes scanning the circuits. "The station has an auxiliary energy port. It's experimental, but it could give you the boost you need, if you're willing to take the risk." Jake froze. "What kind of risk?" Fricks smiled, showing sharp white teeth. "Well, if it fails, the power surge could fry half the lab." Jake swallowed hard. "I'll take it." The trial begins. Minutes later, Jake stood in the center of the lab, the auxiliary energy port now connected to his device. Fricks worked at a nearby console, his fingers flying over the controls. "Ready?" Fricks called, his tone uncertain. Jake's heart raced. "As ready as I'll ever be." He pressed the activation button. The hum was louder this time, deeper, like the growl of some ancient beast waking from slumber. The device pulsed once, twice, and then erupted in a blinding surge of light. A shimmering field began to form, growing slowly, rippling like liquid glass suspended in the air. Jake's breath caught. It was working. Fricks let out a low whistle. "I don't believe it." That's. Suddenly, the lights in the lab flickered. The energy field wavered, its edges jagged and unstable. Jake's eyes darted to the controls. The input levels were spiking dangerously. "Fricks, what's happening?" Jake shouted. "You're drawing too much power." Fricks yelled back. "If it overloads, the entire system cold." A deafening crack split the air as the field collapsed inward, imploding with a shockwave that knocked Jake off his feet. He hit the ground hard, his ears ringing. When the dust settled, he saw Fricks crouched behind the console, his wide eyes staring at the now-smoking device. The room was silent except for the faint crackle of burnt circuits. "Are you insane?" Fricks barked, standing up. "You almost blew up the entire lab." Jake dragged himself to his feet, his head spinning. "But did you see it?" he asked, a weak smile tugging at his lips. "It worked, even if just for a moment. It worked." Fricks shook his head in disbelief. "You're either a genius or a lunatic. Maybe both." The unexpected witness. Before Jake could reply, the lab door hissed open again. Standing in the doorway, her blue skin gleaming under the lab's dim lights, was Lithra. Her piercing gaze shifted from Jake to the smoldering device on the table. "So," she said, stepping inside, "you're still playing with your little toy." Jake straightened, ignoring the ache in his ribs. "It's not a toy." Lithra raised an eyebrow. "Really? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you just broke half the lab." Jake clenched his fists. "If you came here to gloat, don't bother. You saw what it did. You know this technology is real." Lithra studied him for a moment, her expression unreadable. Then, to Jake's surprise, she walked over to the device, leaning in to inspect it closely. "You're reckless, human," she said finally, "but you might be onto something." Jake blinked. "Wait, what?" Lithra's lips curved into a faint smirk. "Don't misunderstand. I still think your methods are crude, and your chances of success are slim. But I've seen enough to know that you're not just some fool chasing a dream. You're a fool who might actually make it." Jake couldn't help but grin. "So does that mean you're admitting I'm right?" "Not yet," Lithra replied, turning toward the door. "But you've earned my attention. Don't waste it." As she left, Jake looked down at his device, his mind racing with possibilities. For the first time, he felt something shift. He wasn't just proving himself anymore. He was making them all see what humanity could do. Unveiling the threat. The station's artificial night cycle had begun, and the vast corridors were bathed in dim, blue light. Jake sat at the corner of the nearly deserted cafeteria, his device disassembled into a dozen parts scattered across the table. His head rested in one hand while the other idly tightened a loose screw. He didn't hear the footsteps approaching until a shadow fell over his work. Jake looked up, startled, to see Fricks standing there, clutching the glowing tablet. The young alien's usually calm face was tense, his luminous green eyes flickering with worry. "You're not going to like this," Fricks said, sliding the tablet onto the table. "Take a look." Jake frowned and scanned the screen. At first, the graphs and data meant little to him. Fluctuating energy signatures, erratic spikes, and a faint ripple of subspace activity. But one detail caught his eye. The signature was growing stronger, moving closer. "What is this?" Jake asked, sitting up straight. Fricks glanced around nervously before answering in a hushed tone. "It's an energy reading we detected just outside the station's perimeter. It started small, but it's growing exponentially. Whatever it is, it's big, and it's heading straight for us." Jake's pulse quickened. "Big? Like how big?" Fricks hesitated, his voice barely above a whisper. "Big enough to bypass the station's perimeter defenses if it gets any closer." The council briefing. Within the hour, Jake and Fricks found themselves in the station's central command chamber. The room was packed with representatives from every species in the coalition, their voices raised in anxious debate. A massive holographic display floated in the center, showing the station's exterior, and the incoming energy signature, a swirling mass of black and green that pulsed ominously. "This is no natural phenomenon," said one of the senior council members, a towering alien with metallic skin. "It's an ancient force, one we've encountered before. The Void Reapers." The room fell silent at the name. Even Jake, who had only heard whispers of the Void Reapers in old Earth legends, felt a chill run down his spine. They consume everything in their path. The metallic alien continued, his voice heavy. "Energy, matter, even light itself. Our weapons were barely enough to stop them last time. And now, they're back." The coalition members erupted into argument. Some demanded immediate evacuation, while others insisted on fortifying the station's defenses. Amid the chaos, Jake stepped forward, his voice steady but firm. "What if I could help?" he said, holding up his prototype. Every head in the room turned toward him. The silence was deafening, and Jake felt the weight of their skepticism pressing down on him. Lythra, seated at the far end of the room, leaned forward, her eyes narrowing. "You? Help? With that broken little box of yours?" Jake met her gaze, his jaw tight. "It's not broken. It works. And if you give me access to the station's energy grid, I can amplify it. My device can create an energy field strong enough to disrupt their advance." The room exploded with voices once more, some laughing, others shouting their objections. A human's invention. One council member sneered, "This is a galactic threat, not a science fair." "Enough." The coalition leader, a stern-faced alien with glowing orange eyes, raised a hand to silence the room. He turned to Jake. "You're saying your device can protect the station?" Jake nodded. "Yes. It's not perfect, but it has the potential to generate an energy disruption field. If we combine it with the station's core, it could stop the Void Reapers, or at least slow them down." The leader studied Jake for a long moment before turning to Lythra. "What do you think? You're the closest thing we have to an expert on energy systems." Lythra's gaze lingered on Jake. She sighed and leaned back in her chair. "It's a ridiculous idea," she said finally. But her lips twitched into a faint smile. "I've seen him pull off ridiculous things before." The leader nodded. "Then you have our permission, human. But if this fails, the blood of everyone on this station will be on your hands." The race against time. The command center buzzed with activity as Jake and Fricks rushed to the station's main reactor. Engineers and technicians scrambled to prepare for the Void Reaper's arrival, while Jake worked furiously to integrate his device into the station's energy grid. "Are you sure this is going to work?" Fricks asked, his voice strained as he adjusted a power conduit. Jake didn't look up. "No," he admitted, "but it's our best shot." The device whirred to life, its glow steady and strong. Jake watched as the energy field began to form, spreading out like a protective dome in the holographic display. For a moment, hope flickered in his chest. Then the alarms blared. "They're here," someone shouted over the intercom. "The Void Reapers have breached the outer perimeter." Jake's hands flew over the controls, his heart pounding. "Fricks, we need to stabilize the output. If the field collapses now." "I'm on it," Fricks yelled, diving under the console to reroute the power flow. The energy field expanded, its shimmering surface stretching toward the edges of the station's defense grid. Jake gritted his teeth, sweat dripping down his face as he pushed the device to its limit. Through the window of the command center, the swirling black mass of the Void Reapers came into view, their presence blotting out the stars. The air seemed to grow colder, and a low, ominous hum filled the room. Jake's fingers trembled as he adjusted the final control. "Come on," he muttered under his breath. "Hold together." The energy field flared, its light bright enough to cast sharp shadows across the room. The Void Reapers hesitated, their advance slowing as the field repelled their dark tendrils. Jake allowed himself a small, shaky smile. "It's working." But deep down, he knew this was only the beginning. The rift deepens. The quiet hum of the station's systems felt louder than ever as Jake stood in the center of the Coalition Council chamber, his fists clenched at his sides. He could feel their eyes on him, unblinking, judgmental, waiting for him to falter. The holographic projection of the Void Reapers hung ominously in the center of the room, a swirling vortex of black and green tendrils. It pulsed faintly, as if mocking their every attempt to prepare. "Your experiment nearly overloaded the station's systems," barked an angular alien with sharp features and skin like polished obsidian. His voice carried the weight of authority and disdain. "Had we not intervened, you might have caused more damage than the Void Reapers themselves." Jake opened his mouth to protest, but another council member cut him off. "Humans, always reckless. You act first and think later. Do you even comprehend the forces you're dealing with?" A ripple of agreement swept through the room, and Jake felt the heat rising in his chest. He was used to being underestimated, but this was different. These weren't just insults. These were accusations that could get him thrown off the station, or worse. "I didn't cause any damage," Jake said, his voice firm but controlled. "I pushed the system because it was necessary, and unless you've got a better idea, my device is still your best shot at stopping them." "You call that thing your best shot?" The familiar, sharp tone of Lythra cut through the air as she stepped forward from the shadows. Her blue skin shimmered under the room's dim lights, and her glowing eyes locked onto Jake. "You're not just reckless, Jake. You're dangerous. Do you even understand what would have happened if the field destabilized completely? The reactor could have gone critical." Jake turned to face her, his frustration boiling over. "I'm trying to save this station. I'm trying to save all of you. And you're doing it by gambling with everyone's lives." Lythra shot back, her voice icy. "You think because you've gotten lucky a few times, you can keep playing hero. This isn't some human action drama. This is real." The room fell silent again as the tension between them crackled like static. Jake's jaw tightened, and for a moment he said nothing. Then he took a deep breath. "I'm not gambling," he said quietly. "I'm taking risks because no one else will. I've seen what these things can do. If we don't act now, there won't be a station left to argue about." A fractured alliance. Lythra's expression flickered, just for a moment, as if his words had struck a chord. But she quickly masked it with a cold smirk. "You're right about one thing. There won't be a station left if we leave it in your hands." Jake felt the sting of her words, but before he could respond, the coalition leader raised a hand, silencing them both. "Enough," he said, his glowing orange eyes narrowing. "We don't have time for personal disputes. The Void Reapers are approaching our defensive perimeter, and we need solutions, not arguments." The leader turned to Jake. "You claim your device can protect us. But right now, all I see is instability. Until you can prove otherwise, your access to the station's core systems is revoked." Jake's heart sank. "You can't do that. If I don't have access, I can't." "That's the point," Lythra interrupted, her voice softer now, but no less sharp. "We can't afford another near catastrophe." Jake stared at her, his chest tight. For a moment, he thought he saw something in her eyes. Regret, maybe, or doubt. But then she turned away, and the moment was gone. An unexpected ally. Hours later, Jake found himself back in the lab, staring at his disassembled device. The room was quiet, save for the occasional hum of nearby equipment. He felt defeated, the weight of the council's judgment pressing down on him. "You're really just going to sit there?" a voice said, breaking the silence. Jake looked up to see Fricks standing in the doorway, his arms crossed and a mischievous grin on his face. "Didn't take you for a quitter." Jake sighed. "What's the point? They shut me out. I can't do anything without access to the core." Fricks walked over, his glowing green eyes twinkling. "You humans are all the same. You think rules are unbreakable walls, but you forget. They're just walls, and walls can be climbed." Jake frowned. "What are you saying?" Fricks leaned in, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "I know a few backdoors into the system. Nothing major, just enough to give you what you need." Jake's eyes widened. "You'd risk that? For me?" Fricks shrugged. "Someone has to. Besides, I want to see if your crazy idea actually works." A slow smile spread across Jake's face. "You're a lot braver than you look, Fricks." "Don't get used to it," Fricks said, smirking. "Now let's get to work." Hope in the shadows. As the two of them worked in the dim lab, Jake couldn't help but feel a flicker of hope. He might not have the council's support, and Lythra might think he was a fool, but he wasn't alone. And as long as he had even one ally, he wasn't giving up. Not yet. The showdown begins. The station trembled. It wasn't from the Void Reapers, yet, but from the collective tension radiating through its corridors. Every system hummed at maximum capacity. Every light flickered slightly under the strain. The alien space station, a marvel of engineering that had stood unchallenged for centuries, now felt like it was holding its breath. Jake stood in the command center, staring at the massive holographic display that dominated the room. The Void Reapers were close now, their black, swirling mass creeping through the empty void of space like a living storm. They were just outside the defensive perimeter, their tendrils testing the automated barriers, peeling them apart like layers of thin fabric. "Outer defenses are failing," a technician called out, their voice shaking. "Energy grid integrity is down to 40%. Jake's heart raced, but he forced himself to stay calm. This was it, the moment he had been preparing for. His device, now modified and integrated into the station's systems, thanks to Fricks's help, was ready. At least he hoped it was. The coalition leader, his stern orange eyes glowing brighter than ever, turned to Jake. "This is your chance, human. Your device better work, or we're all dead." Jake nodded, ignoring the weight of the leader's words. "It'll work. Just give me control of the grid." Before the leader could respond, Lythra's voice cut through the room like a blade. "Are we really going to trust him with this? One miscalculation, and he could destabilize the reactor, or worse, destroy the entire station." Jake turned to her, his frustration boiling over. "Do you have a better idea? Because if you do, I'd love to hear it." Lythra opened her mouth to retort, but the coalition leader raised a hand, silencing her. "Enough. We don't have time for this." He looked at Jake. "You have your chance. Don't waste it. The first strike." Jake rushed to the console, his fingers flying over the controls. The device, now connected to the station's main reactor, began to hum with power. The energy field started to form, a shimmering dome that slowly expanded outward, stretching toward the edges of the station's perimeter. "Field at 30%. Fricks called out from a nearby station, his voice steady despite the chaos. "Holding stable for now." Jake glanced at the display. The Void Reapers were still advancing, their tendrils inching closer to the field. He knew it was only a matter of time before they tested its strength. "Field at 50%, Fricks reported. Tendrils approaching the outer edge. The command center was silent as everyone watched the hologram. The first tendril touched the energy field, and the room held its collective breath. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the tendril recoiled, its dark mass flickering as if in pain. Cheers erupted in the room, but Jake didn't celebrate. He knew this was only the beginning. The counterattack. The Void Reapers didn't retreat. Instead, they surged forward, their tendrils slamming against the field with increasing force. The shimmering dome wavered but held, repelling each attack. "Field at 70%, Fricks shouted. "But the power draw is spiking." Jake's hands flew across the controls, redirecting energy from non-essential systems. Lights flickered, and secondary systems shut down across the station. It wasn't enough. "The reactor's reaching its limit," Lythra said, stepping beside him. Her tone was sharp, but her expression was different. Calm, almost resigned. "If you keep pushing it, You'll cause a cascade failure. Jake didn't look at her. Then help me stabilize it. For a moment, Lithra didn't respond. Then she sighed, stepping up to the console beside him. You're insane. You know that. Jake allowed himself a small grin. You've mentioned it before. Together, they worked to balance the power flow, their fingers moving in sync over the controls. The field continued to grow, its light brighter now, more stable. But the Void Reapers weren't stopping. They threw themselves against the field with relentless fury, each impact shaking the station. The turning point. Field at 90%, Fricks reported. We're almost there, but the reactor can't take much more. Jake glanced at the display. The Void Reapers were beginning to falter, their movements slower, more erratic. The field was working, but it needed one final push. I'm taking it to 100%, Jake said, his voice steady. Lithra grabbed his arm. Are you insane? You'll blow the reactor. Jake met her gaze. If we don't, they'll destroy the station anyway. For a moment, Lithra stared at him, her glowing eyes unreadable. Then she nodded. Fine. But if this fails, I'm going to personally make sure your name goes down in history as the human who almost saved us. Jake grinned. Deal. He pushed the final command, and the field surged to full power. The Void Reapers recoiled, their tendrils burning away as the energy field expanded outward, enveloping them. The room was silent as everyone watched the display, holding their breath. Then, with a final, ear-splitting shriek, the Void Reapers disintegrated, their black mass dissolving into nothingness. The aftermath. The station was eerily quiet. The only sound was the faint hum of the energy field, now stable and glowing faintly around the station's perimeter. Jake slumped against the console, his entire body trembling with exhaustion. We did it, Fricks said softly, his voice filled with disbelief. We actually did it. The coalition leader turned to Jake, his expression unreadable. Then he gave a single solemn nod. You saved us, human. Jake smiled weakly, but his gaze shifted to Lithra. She stood silently, staring at the hologram of the now empty void where the Void Reapers had been. Well, Jake said, his voice hoarse, still think I'm just a reckless human. Lithra turned to him, her lips twitching into the faintest of smiles. Reckless? Absolutely. But maybe you're not as hopeless as I thought. Jake chuckled, the sound more relief than humor. I'll take it. As the room erupted into cheers and celebration, Jake allowed himself a moment to breathe. The Void Reapers were gone, but he knew this was only the beginning. There were still challenges ahead, still battles to fight. But for now, he had proven that humanity had a place in the stars. The final test. The station's victory celebration was short-lived. Barely an hour after the Void Reapers' retreat, the alarms blared again, their sharp, staccato wail cutting through the air like a blade. Jake was in the engineering bay, running diagnostics on his device, when the first tremor rocked the station. Tools clattered to the floor, and the hum of the power systems faltered for a split second. Jake froze, his stomach sinking. This wasn't over. Jake. Fricks burst into the room, his green eyes wide with panic. You need to get to the command center. Now. What's going on? Jake asked, already grabbing his device and bolting for the door. The Void Reapers, Fricks said breathlessly as they sprinted down the corridor. They're not gone. That was just a scout wave. The real swarm is coming. The swarm approaches. The command center was a scene of chaos. Coalition leaders shouted over one another. Technicians scrambled to monitor failing systems, and a holographic display showed a new, larger mass of Void Reapers emerging from the void. This time, they didn't look hesitant or disorganized. They moved as one, a coordinated and unstoppable force, their sheer size blotting out the stars. They're 5 times larger than the first wave. A technician called out. All systems on the defensive perimeter are failing. The coalition leader slammed his fist onto the console. We don't have the energy to sustain another full activation of the field. The reactor's already at its limit. Jake stepped forward, his voice cutting through the noise. Then we need to upgrade it. My device can. Enough. The coalition leader snapped, his glowing orange eyes blazing. Your device barely held up the first time. What makes you think it can stop something this big? Jake hesitated, feeling the weight of every eye in the room on him. Then he took a deep breath and squared his shoulders. Because we don't have a choice. Either we push it to its limits, or we're all dead. The plan. Lythra stepped forward, her expression grim but determined. He's right. As much as I hate to admit it, his device is our best shot. But we can't rely on the same strategy. We need to amplify its output and find a way to sustain the reactor. Jake blinked in surprise. You're agreeing with me. Don't get used to it, Lythra muttered, moving to the console beside him. If this works, it's because I helped. If it fails, it's all on you. Jake smirked despite the tension. Fair enough. Let's get to work. The room fell silent as Jake, Lythra, and Fricks coordinated a desperate plan. They would reroute every non-essential system to the reactor, using the station's reserve energy stores to fuel the device. It was a gamble, but it was the only option. The final test begins. Minutes later, Jake stood in the engineering bay, his device connected directly to the reactor. The hum of the station's systems had quieted, replaced by the deep, rhythmic thrum of the reactor's core. Lythra and Fricks worked at the consoles nearby, their movements precise and synchronized. The swarm will be within range in 60 seconds, Fricks reported, his voice tight. Jake adjusted the controls on his device, his hands trembling slightly. He couldn't afford a mistake now. Not when everything was on the line. Activating the field in 3, 2, 1. Lythra's voice was steady, but Jake could see the tension in her posture. He pressed the activation button. The device roared to life, its glow brighter and more intense than before. The energy field expanded outward, faster and stronger than it had during the first wave. It shimmered like liquid light, enveloping the station in a protective dome. They're hitting the field. Fricks shouted. Energy levels holding, but barely. On the holographic display, the Void Reapers slammed against the field, their dark mass writhing and twisting as they tried to breach it. The station shuddered with each impact, the strain visible in the flickering lights and groaning metal. Field stability is dropping. Lythra called out. We need more power. Jake's mind raced. The reactor was already at maximum output, but it wasn't enough. He glanced at the auxiliary power console, a desperate idea forming in his mind. I'll stabilize it manually, he said, grabbing a pair of insulated gloves and heading for the reactor interface. Are you insane? Lythra shouted after him. You'll get yourself killed. Jake turned back, his eyes blazing with determination. If I don't, we're all dead anyway. Trust me. A race against time. The heat near the reactor was overwhelming, the air thick and suffocating. Jake worked quickly, rerouting power conduits and adjusting flow regulators. Sparks flew as he made the final connections, his hands shaking from exhaustion. Jake, the field is collapsing. Fricks's voice crackled over the intercom. Whatever you're doing, do it now. Jake gritted his teeth and activated the final override. The reactor surged, its output spiking dangerously close to critical levels. The energy field flared, its light blinding as it pushed back against the Void Reapers with renewed strength. In the command center, Lythra and Fricks watched in awe as the field expanded, engulfing the swarm. The Void Reapers writhed and shrieked, their dark tendrils disintegrating under the intense energy. It's working, Fricks shouted. The field is neutralizing them. The cost of victory. Back in the reactor chamber, Jake staggered away from the controls, his vision swimming. The reactor's hum had stabilized, the danger of overload averted, but the strain had taken its toll. Jake collapsed to his knees, his breathing shallow. Jake. Lythra's voice came over the intercom. filled with a mix of relief and concern. You did it. The swarm is gone. Jake managed a weak smile. Told you, it wasn't just a feeble effort. Then darkness overtook him. The aftermath. When Jake woke, he was in the med bay, his body aching but alive. Lythra stood by his bedside, her usual smirk replaced with something softer. "You're an idiot," she said, crossing her arms. "But you saved us. So, maybe you're not so hopeless after all." Jake chuckled weakly. "I'll take that as a compliment." As the station prepared for repairs and recovery, Jake knew one thing for certain. Humanity had earned its place among the stars. And this was only the beginning, proving them wrong. The silence after the battle was deafening. For the first time in hours, the station was still. The hum of the energy field had faded, and the Void Reapers were gone, reduced to scattered particles drifting into the void. The once chaotic command center now felt like a temple, every soul within it frozen in awe and exhaustion. Jake was unconscious when they brought him into the med bay. His hair was singed, his hands blistered from the reactor's heat, and his body drained of strength. The Coalition's best medics worked quickly, stabilizing him as the station's leaders gathered outside the room, their whispers a mix of disbelief and reluctant admiration. "He did it," one council member murmured, shaking their head. "The human actually did it. He nearly killed himself doing it," Lythra said sharply, standing at the edge of the group. Her tone was cold, but her glowing eyes betrayed a flicker of something deeper, something she wasn't ready to admit, even to herself. Jake's awakening. Jake's eyes fluttered open to the faint sound of beeping monitors. The med bay ceiling swam into focus, its soft blue lights a stark contrast to the chaos he had left behind. He groaned, his body aching as if it had been crushed and pieced back together. "You're awake," came a familiar voice. Lythra stood by the bed, her arms crossed and her usual smirk faintly visible. "I was starting to think you were going to sleep through your victory parade." Jake chuckled weakly, though it came out more like a cough. "Parade? Don't tell me they actually like me now." Lythra's smirk softened, and she tilted her head. "Let's just say you've earned a little respect. Not from everyone, of course, but enough." Jake shifted, trying to sit up, and winced. "So, we won." Lythra nodded, her expression turning serious. "The Void Reapers are gone. Your device worked, better than anyone expected. You saved the station. You saved all of us." Jake smiled faintly, the weight of her words sinking in. But then his brow furrowed. "The reactor did it. It's stable," Lythra said quickly, cutting him off. "Fricks and I managed to bring it back under control. You gave us just enough time." She paused, her gaze lingering on him. "You risked everything, Jake, and it worked. But it was reckless." Jake met her eyes, his voice quiet but firm. "It wasn't reckless. It was necessary. Sometimes you have to take the leap, even when you don't know if there's a net." Lythra stared at him for a long moment before letting out a soft laugh. "You humans, always so dramatic." Recognition. The door to the med bay slid open, and the Coalition leader entered, his orange eyes glowing with an intensity that made the room feel smaller. Behind him, Fricks hovered, a sheepish grin on his face. "Jake," the leader began, his voice resonating with authority. "I owe you an apology." Jake blinked. "An apology?" The leader inclined his head. "When you first arrived, I doubted you. I doubted your people. But today, you showed us what humans are capable of. Your determination, your ingenuity. It saved us all." He paused, his tone softening. "You have earned our respect and our gratitude." Jake's throat tightened, and for a moment, he didn't know what to say. Then he smiled. "Thank you, but I didn't do it alone. Fricks, Lythra, they were with me every step of the way." The leader glanced at them and nodded. "Indeed, this victory belongs to all of you." Fricks beamed, while Lythra shifted uncomfortably, her smirk returning. "Don't get used to it, human. I still think you're a reckless fool." Jake grinned. "And I still think you're stubborn. Guess we make a good team." The future beckons. Later, as the station began repairs and the crew prepared for the next steps, Jake found himself on the observation deck, staring out at the endless expanse of stars. The faint glow of the station's energy field flickered in the distance, a reminder of what had been won and what had been lost. Lithra joined him, her presence quiet but unmistakable. For a while, neither of them spoke, the silence between them comfortable for the first time. "So," she said finally, her tone lighter than usual, "what's next for humanity's great hero?" Jake chuckled, shaking his head. "Hero, huh? I'm just a guy with a box of wires and a lot of stubbornness." Lithra raised an eyebrow. "That box of wires saved the galaxy. Don't sell yourself short." Jake shrugged, his gaze still on the stars. "I don't know what's next, but if there's one thing I've learned, it's that humans are a lot stronger than anyone gives us credit for, and we're just getting started." Lithra nodded, her expression thoughtful. "Well, if you ever need help building your next crazy invention, you know where to find me." Jake turned to her, his smile genuine. "I'll hold you to that." The stars stretched endlessly before them, a vast, uncharted frontier. And for the first time, Jake felt not just like a human among aliens, but like an equal, a part of something far greater than himself.